Good morning and welcome back. Welcome to Ruins on a Hill Media, where forgotten and neglected truths are unearthed. And welcome to today's video, which is, what are the chances regaining an appreciation for life? And so, as you know, we live in a world today where, people's and this is just a global statement, but people's subjective appreciation for life is probably in an all-time low. I don't know actually if that's accurate or not. When I look back over human history, I think human life has been at risk, has been on the chopping block, so to speak, ever since Cain killed Abel. And so we are living in times now where we don't hear a whole lot of appreciation, at least in the media. We don't hear a whole lot of stories about people demonstrating an appreciation for life. And so there's different forms of this. And so I just really felt compelled today to share some thoughts that I think can help some folks on an individual basis. So really, appreciation for your own life is where it starts. Now, some people have a inflated appreciation for themselves. Many people do. These are the people that have a big ego and kind of grandiose in how they see themselves and think that they're the best thing ever and all that. There's a lot of people out there who struggle with just negativity towards themselves, sometimes for reasons that may be legitimate. Other times it's because of what we call false guilt and false shame. But whatever the reasons, there are people struggling, and this video is not likely. This isn't going to help someone who is actively dealing with major depression or someone who's suicidal, because they're not going to be able to really receive this message when they're in that state of mind and in that state of emotion. But when they're feeling better, this might be a video that could help them. And so my focus is going to be on probability. Now, you might be thinking, what on earth does that have to do with anything? I'm not a mathematician, but I remember taking probability and statistics in college, and so it really struck me that one of the ways that we can regain or gain an appreciation for life is by looking at probability. Now, as a Christian, I'm going to say, that the real basis for gaining appreciation for not only our life but the lives of others is because of the value that God places on every life through the act of creation, and also through the act of Jesus Christ going to the cross to die for every one of us. So that's a whole realm of thought. We're not going to get into all that today, but that's the true basis for appreciation. But I also feel like just in our minds, we need a little bit of help to see some things that the ho-hum, mundane, day-to-day routines of life tends to desensitize us, tends to numb us out a little bit when it comes to really being aware of the amazing gift that life is. And one of the movies that one of the scenes from one of Tom Hanks's old movies, Joe versus the Volcano. If you've ever had a chance to see that, you'll know what I'm talking about. I would recommend it. It's really funny, but there's a profound moment where he's out on this boat, a small yacht really, out on the open ocean with this woman that he barely knows. It's a crew of like 3 people, and it's just this journey that he's on, and he looks at her. They're laying on the deck one night talking, he looks at her and he says, basically, I wish I could remember the exact words because it was really good. But isn't life amazing? Isn't it just, most people walk through life blind to the wonder of it, and his eyes are being opened. He's on this journey that's taking him towards death, actually. And so pretty quickly, his eyes are being opened, even as he's choosing to engage in a self-sacrificial act. He is at the same time developing this profound awareness of the wonder of life and the wonder of being alive. And so people who are suicidal have been through a lot of things, usually, that have stripped away from them this awareness for themselves first, but usually for others as well. Obviously, all the ways in which murder is committed, not only physical murder, but all the ways in which people commit verbal murder, again, it just indicates a tremendous loss of appreciation for life, for being alive on this planet, really the miracle of it. And so the ideal, or the belief, that there is no worthless person on this earth is something that I think we've lost. I don't think we're losing it. There's pockets of people, so to speak, in our world today who still have that as a core belief in their hearts. But there are just so many people now who really, if you were to ask them and they were to get brutally honest with themselves and with others, they would say that they do believe there are some people who are worth less, who have no value. And so we don't hear people saying it directly, but whether it's whether it's racial slurs or things like that, and whatever form it takes. Excuse me, didn't get my coffee today. Whatever form it takes, it's there. It's an undercurrent that I think we're all aware of. So I'm not going to get again real deep into spirituality, but on the flip side, I would say that yes, God wants us to be thankful and appreciative, and God wants us to be thankful and appreciative for the life that He's given us and for other people's lives, because He's the author of life and He has given value to all life, all human life. Of course, there's value to all life in general, but specifically for human beings, the true basis for the value that we have, as I said before, is one, God created us, and secondly, He created us in His image, and that image of God built into who we are at the core of our being gives us innate value. All right, so understanding that life is difficult, sometimes it's hard to understand how the difficulties of life translate into loss of appreciation for life, but on the other hand, maybe it's not so hard to understand. One of the things that helps sustain our appreciation for life is when we understand God's promises to walk with us through the difficulties of life. It keeps our hearts from being hardened towards ourselves and towards others, because of understanding that truth, that God never loses the value that He holds in His heart for us, no matter what sins we may commit, no matter what mistakes we may make. That value never goes away. Of course, sin and pain, as I talked about in another video, can drive us in directions that end up being shameful and destructive and hurtful, but that never destroys our value, because we do have an eternal soul, and that eternal soul has unending value. Now, that being said, we could go into a whole separate video or teachings, and many people have taught about heaven and hell, and so we understand that things we do can subjectively tarnish our value system, but it can also tarnish our behavior and our value system and our behavior. Just on a practical level, we stop doing things that impart greater worth. We stop doing things that impart a greater sense of appreciation when we do find ourselves caught up in a cycle of shame or guilt, or acting out in ways that just tear down our sense of appreciation. So anyway, like I said, that's kind of a whole separate topic, but I'm looking at my cheat sheet. Sorry. I'm going to jump into the idea of probability now, just to add to the things that God has already given us as foundations for appreciating life, the things I just mentioned. And so, what are the chances of being alive? Never thought about that, just on a probability basis alone. Think about it. What's the probability? So I'm going to give some examples. So just for me, what's the probability of Greg being alive, right? So one thing I know about my dad is that he was born 13 years after his next older sibling. You know, so in not so friendly terms, we might say he was an accident. You know, some people say that jokingly, and they value the child that was born as an accident. But the fact is, he wasn't planned. You know, so the probability of my dad having been born was lower than most, maybe we might say, because he wasn't planned. You know, when he was an adult, before I was born. Okay, so this was sometime after one or both of my older brothers were born. He started feeling sick. He started running a fever. My mom took him to the family doctor. The doctor wasn't sure what was going on. Just gave him some penicillin as a precaution. And so, turns out my dad's appendix was getting ready to rupture, or had ruptured, I think. And so the toxins from his appendix were making him sick and spreading infection throughout his body. My dad, the surgery that was done on my dad ended up in some medical journal because he barely made it. And if it wasn't for the penicillin that was given to him at that time, that moment, you know, that hour of that day, if another 6 hours had gone by, it's very likely that he would have died, and I would not be here. If his doctor had not had that thought, I should just go ahead. You know, another doctor might think, we'll wait and see. You know, come back tomorrow, you know, if things are still looking bad. If the doctor had not made that decision in that moment, I would not be here, and my children would not be here. I remember, you know, so then in my own life, what are some things that could have happened that would prevent my children from being here? When I was a kid, we went on vacation a few times down to Florida, and I remember one time we were at a rest area coming home, and we were getting in the car, and I said, oh, hold on a minute, I gotta tie my shoe. And so I got out of the car, stooped down on the ground, tied my shoe, and then we went on. Well, heading up the highway, a car came crashing across our lanes from the other side of the highway, a certain distance up ahead. But I remember thinking and reflecting on how, if I had not tied my shoe, it's possible we would have been just a few seconds further up the road, and quite possibly could have been killed in a horrible accident. I don't know that for a fact. We might have barely been missed by that other car, or we might have been struck. Then when I was about 13, I went to a friend's house, and this is a funny story today, but when you stop and think about it, I got on a motorcycle, and I didn't really want to, but my friends pressured me, and so I got on. I was the first one to ride. I'd never ridden one before, and my friend's trying to tell me how to work the gears and stuff, so he points me down the driveway. They lived on a farm that the driveway ended on a 2-lane road, but it was a pretty busy 2-lane road, and they had a big front yard. And I remember thinking, I'm going to go down the driveway, turn right into the front yard, and then I'm going to jump off, and I'll be good. Well, things didn't go quite as planned. I pulled back on the throttle, and I go, I don't know, 8 or 10 feet forward, but then I veered sharply to the left. And to the left was a parked pickup truck, a garage, part of the garage door that wasn't blocked by the truck, the wall of the garage, a metal rain bin, and then there was a little walkway, and then after that was all this old rusty farm implements and some trees and stuff. I remember as I veered to the left, the side view mirror of the truck went past my head, just a couple inches past my head, really. If I had hit that side view mirror, and within like 15 feet, I was going, I don't know how fast, but I was going plenty fast to kill myself on that side view mirror. If I had hit that thing, I can guarantee 2 things: severe brain damage and broken neck. That could have ended my life that day. And so my wife, her parents, they lived at a time when teenagers would go out and cruise in their cars, and they'd stop in at the local restaurants, and they'd meet each other at the restaurants and have a hamburger and a milkshake, that era, when that was popular. And so they met randomly one night at a White Castle restaurant somewhere in northern Kentucky. And my wife is here today because both of her parents made a series of decisions that night to get in the car with whoever they got in the car with. And it wasn't raining that night, and they met. They happened to decide to go to the White Castle, and they happened to show up at the same time. And whatever those circumstances were, they happened to muster up the courage, or someone said, "Hey, why don't you go talk to that guy?" or "Hey, why don't you go talk to that girl?" All these things happened in such a way that my wife's parents not only met, but fell in love and got married. What's the probability of any and all of these things? Right? And you add up or multiply the probabilities of these different events, and the number gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Especially when you add them up generation after generation after generation. So I'm going to take some time to break this down. I hope you enjoy this, because this is mind-boggling when you really stop and think about it. I'm going to start with talking about the sperm and the egg. Okay? Now, this is just factual information. If you really stop and think about the probabilities here, we could stop right here and not talk about these other things that I just mentioned. And the probability of you being here would be so low as to be incalculable, right? So let's think about. So a woman produces 1 egg a month. Okay, one of those eggs is you, or half of you. So then, how many eggs does a woman produce in her lifetime? So if she's fertile from the age of 15, let's say through age 50, what is that, 35 years? And I don't nitpick here, but you get my point. So let's say 35 years, just to be safe. 35 times 12. I don't know what that is, okay, but it's a number. But then the sperm, men produce infinitely more sperm, and only one of them formed you, helped to form you. So I think, if I remember correctly, in one orgasm, a man produces 250 million sperm, and only one of them could make you with that one egg, right? Now, we're going to break this down even further. This is not inappropriate. This is not gross or immoral or disgusting. This is the fact of the matter. So, if the man has the orgasm, in order for the sperm that makes you to reach the egg, I'm guessing that there's only a very, very, like a microsecond of time where that one sperm would be able to reach the egg before all the other sperm. Because the sperm are jostling around, swimming around inside the man's body, while they're active, while they're still active and alive. And so when he has an orgasm, if he had the orgasm a split second sooner or a split second later, you wouldn't be here, because a different sperm would have reached the egg, more than likely. The fact is, multiple sperm do reach the egg at basically the same time, but it's the one that got there just a nanosecond sooner and, has just a little bit more energy or whatever to penetrate inside the membrane of that egg and fertilize that egg. And so, think about the timing of two people making love and having an orgasm at that exact moment when the sperm and the egg, I'm focusing especially on the unbelievable probability that one sperm would fertilize the egg. When two people are making love, there's no formula like when an orgasm has to happen. The split second is the time window. The only time window that would allow you to be here right now. And so, how many of those time windows exist during the number of years that a man is fertile and could have a baby? Well, we're talking about microseconds. How many seconds are in a day? How many seconds are in a year? How many microseconds are in a day or a year? And a man remains fertile longer. It's unbelievable when we really stop and think about it. Unbelievable. Okay? Other things that changed the timing of... So think of all the factors now that would change the timing of that one orgasm happening at the moment that egg is available to be fertilized. We can't even calculate all the factors all the factors that could change that. My parents had a miscarriage. My mom had a miscarriage before I was born. A few years. My older brother, who would have been here, well, if he had been born, you better believe all the factors leading up to the next child being born would mean that I wasn't going to be here. So the fact that he was not able to make it allowed me to have a chance. But the timing of that sperm and egg coming together is, like I said, we could just stop right there. Now think about the probability of that just for you. But guess what? You have to multiply that probability generation after generation after generation after generation, all the way back to Adam and Eve. All the way back. See, I'm guessing that the probability of any one of us being here right now is lower than 1 in every, if you took every atom in the universe, I'm guessing that the probability is lower than 1. It'd be like finding that one atom out of all the atoms in the universe. Because the multiplication of probability, generation after generation, it becomes a number that's incalculable. It makes a Google look like the number 1. And so, think about some of these other things. So decisions. Okay, so what are the chances of 2 people meeting in the first place to be able to have sex and create a baby? So, think of all the decisions we make every day, all day long, especially in regards to relationships when you're not married yet and you're trying to find that long-term relationship. So for example, my dad, one day he decided he'd go into the Army. My parents met when my dad was in the Army. He was stationed in Puerto Rico. And he met my mom, who is one of total of 6 sisters. 6 sisters. And so my dad was stationed in San Juan. He was stationed at El Morro, which is an old 14th or 16th century fort. And so the military radio station was located in the under the causeway, which was a protected area. And he did military news and stuff. And so he was stationed there. And then my mom lived in San Juan at the time. And she and her sisters would go to some of the, some of the military dances and stuff. And not only did my dad meet my mom, of course he could have met, I think he met probably almost all of her sisters. I think he did meet all of her sisters. So he ended up being more attracted to my mom. So guess why? Or, not only was she cute, of course, but so were her sisters. But my mom happened to speak a little bit better English. She, I believe in high school, all of her friends were learning English in a formal way. But my mom, if I understand correctly, she was maybe a little more adept, and I think she also took an extra interest in it. She was teaching herself a little bit more. If my mom hadn't done that, my dad might have just passed on to the next young lady who he could talk to more easily.